quite frankly, I am tired of them pimping children of color for profit.
Hey, friends and listeners of the Switch for Good podcast. Yep, that's you. I have some really exciting news. Dotsie and I have started a Switch for Good podcast Facebook group. We created it so we can build a community of fans that will help us improve the show and deliver on the topics that you want to learn more about. So we want to hear what your favorite content is, what you want more of, and what you want less of. And if you like the length of the show, Dotsie and I are always talking about the length of the show, right, Dotsie?
Yes.
We want to tailor our show around the needs and desires of our incredible listeners, almost 500,000 of you. And it's really simple to join. Just go to our Switch for Good Facebook page. That's Switch, the number 4, and then Good. And then click on groups. And there we are, the Switch for Good podcast chat. You can post directly in the group, share ideas, talk to other listeners, and connect with like-minded folks. So go, run, join our Facebook group and tell us what you want.
Oh, well, today, folks, we are so fortunate to have a guest who was with us when it all started. He was our very first guest on the Switch for Good podcast when maybe 5 of you were listening. So it's only fitting that he should join us for our very special 200th episode. You will even see him on our Switch for Good staff page, actually. That's how closely we work with him. I'm going to get emotional. I am a mad fan and almost feel like Dr. Milton Mills is my brother, is partly a partner in crime in the work that we're doing. We're going to dive into today, of course. But we're just, at the end of it, just so thrilled and truly honored to have with us today the esteemed doctor and vegan activist, you already know, Dr. Milton Mills. For those of you who may have missed our first episode, well, first of all, I order you to go back and listen to it because it's a good one. But Dr. Mills earned his medical degree from Stanford University and did his internal medicine residency at Georgetown University Hospital. He now practices critical care medicine in the DC area. Dr. Mills was also the lead plaintiff in PCRM's lawsuit asking for warning labels on milk. And he also stars in the very excellent documentaries, which I'm sure many of you have seen, What the Health and The Invisible Vegan. So we are just thrilled to have him back. As I mentioned, he's my friend. He's my warrior twin because we look exactly identical, don't we? To get soy milk in school so that kids have a fair and just choice at the lunch counter. And just quite simply, one of my favorite humans roaming the planet. So welcome back for our 200th episode, my friend.
Thank you. It's great to be back. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, this discussion could easily last 2 or 3 hours. So what I would love to do is to kind of work backwards. I sort of want to pan out, and then we're gonna zone in into so many really intriguing aspects of your life. But I would like to start with some hope. You've been in this movement for a while, and since you started on this journey of activism, what changes have you seen in this movement that are kind of starting to make you feel like there is a reason to be optimistic?
The vast variety of options that we have available now just were literally and truly unknown back then. And when you told people that you were that you didn't eat meat, they would look at you like, "What's wrong with you?" You're probably going to be dead in a couple of weeks. And so the fact that veganism, not just vegetarianism, but actual veganism, is such a tremendous force in the world, and it is so widely known. And you can go to any restaurant and order vegan options, but and that there are actual vegan restaurants now. The world has absolutely changed. There's just been a massive sea change. truly there is much more that needs to be done, and that remains to be done. But the change that has occurred thus far has been more than I thought that I would ever see in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just been amazing and encouraging and affirming. So and it's been thrilling to be part of it. I just got back from the Charlotte, North Carolina Veg Fest this past weekend, and how can I explain this? There were just several young men and women, kids from my standpoint, who came by and saw me sitting at a table with, I was signing this book that I have an essay in called Brother Vegan. And this one particular young lady just, she started telling me about how I helped her in her vegan journey after she saw my videos online. And she just, it's hard to put into words how she was expressing how much those videos meant to her. And it's hard for me to put into words just how moving that was to me. There was another incident that I had. This was several years ago. I was at another conference, and this young woman, she was a mother, and she came into me and she said, I wanted to go vegan. I decided to go vegan because of animal rights, and I really wanted to stop, participating in the slaughter of animals. But I had young children, and I was really, really concerned because people were telling me, you're going to hurt your children, and you're going to not provide them the nutrition. She said, and then I saw, this still is very emotional for you. She said, then I saw your videos, and I knew I was doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And I knew that it was okay. And I'm telling you, there's just nothing better than that. I mean, that's like, my God, that's why I do what I do.
You're so gifted at sharing your knowledge, as it comes across with such heart.
When it comes from doctors, it means, I'm sorry to say this, but it means a lot more than coming from me or you, even Dotsie. Mm-hmm. When it comes from a doctor, it really lends the credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that is truly the entire reason that I went to medical school, and that is absolutely what I chose to dedicate my life to. Mm-hmm. You're right. There was not that body of information, and when it became clear to me that yes, this was the best diet for us, and yes, this is clearly what we were designed to eat, and I decided that I wanted to do the research to help people understand exactly how our bodies were designed to both anatomically and physiologically to handle exclusively plants, but also from a health standpoint, why being plant exclusive was better for us. And I initially thought about trying to do it by getting a master's in public health, but then I realized that if I did that my entire career, people would say, oh, you can't say that, you're not a doctor. So I decided, you know what, I gotta become a doctor.
So I'll just go to Stanford.
It's kind of funny, because it was a pleasant surprise to me that I actually like being a doctor.
Would love for you to help people understand how from our very beginnings as humans and our genetics and how we're built and what we were built to eat, why we are inherently herbivorous as humans.
Sure. What was really fascinating to me was, again, when I first started looking into this, people would kind of talk about the teeth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would say, well, you look at, the obvious things. You look at a lion or a dog's teeth, and you compare it to a human's teeth, and clearly, we do not have either the fangs or the kind of blade-like molars that you find in a carnivore, but it goes way beyond that, because it's not just the structure of the teeth, it's also the jaw mechanics. Because in herbivores, the jaws actually, the teeth slide across each other horizontally, which is what gives you that grinding motion you need to grind up plant foods, because plant foods have fiber. And to get at the nutrients inside the plant cells, you got to grind up those plant cells to get at the fiber. Animal tissue has no fiber. So all you need to do is slice off a chunk of it, swallow it, and the digestive enzymes do the rest. So carnivore jaws actually close in a vertical fashion to give you that slicing motion, with those blade-like molars slide past each other vertically, slice off the flesh, slice through tendons, they swallow a big chunk of it, and then they have this incredibly powerful acid that just digests this, really liquefy this stuff and help them digest it. Even more interesting, carnivores have gigantic stomachs, because in the wild, they typically will only make a kill approximately every 7 to 10 days. And most of the time that they hunt, they are not successful. So they spend a lot of energy that they have to get back when they finally do make a kill. So they can actually consume 30% of their body weight at a single meal. And they have these huge stomachs. So that means like a lion that weighs 300 pounds can consume 30% of her body weight at one meal. So that's like 90 pounds of flesh at a single meal. Wow. Which is a huge amount of food. So they can eat enough at a single meal to last them for 10 days. Herbivores, very different. Herbivores have much smaller stomachs because plant foods take a lot more processing. Herbivores have to eat multiple times each day. They eat a small meal, they process that meal, then they go back and they eat another meal and process that. So they have to eat multiple times just to consume enough calories to last them a single day. And again, that's the kind of digestive system we have. We have the small stomach that we process a meal, and then we go back and we consume another meal so that we can consume enough calories to last us a single day.
The one that I love that you talk about is the, because Dotsie's an Olympic athlete, so we could talk about that, how carnivores are on their toes more than we.
Oh, yes. 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 So that has to do with the fact that carnivores are designed to chase prey. So they are permanently on their toes so that they can be ready to run. Whereas we're flat-footed because we're designed for walking, because herbivores, again, are designed for foraging. Carnivores are designed for predation. And so it's just, the differences are just, myriad. The small intestines and the plant eaters are 10 to 12 times body length, and the herbivores are much shorter. The large intestines in the herbivores are much longer, have a pouched appearance. In the carnivores, they're much shorter, straighter, which is why when we eat meat, the flesh stays in our system too long, starts to rot, creates cancers. That's why we get colon cancers. The carnivores don't. Herbivores have appendix, carnivores don't. It's just, again, on and on and on. The differences are just too many to kind of recount here, but I would encourage people to go on YouTube and look at my lecture, Are Humans Designed to Eat Meat? And it goes through all of those differences and just lists them so that they can get a good sense of just all of the various differences between the meat eaters and the plant eaters. And they'll see very in great detail the differences between the two of us, or the differences between the different species.
What do you say to people who say, paleo diet folks maybe, who say, well, people did that a long time ago. We ate meat, so it's got to be right.
Yeah,
it's got to be natural.
No, the paleo is a complete fiction. It is all made up, and it's all made up because the metrics don't pan out, meaning that in order for a diet to be practical, it has to add up in terms of the energy metrics, meaning that you have to be able, in order for a diet to work, you have to be able to make it work in terms of energy out versus energy in, meaning that an animal has to be able to expend less energy procuring a particular diet than it extracts from the food it captures. Human beings are too inefficient when it comes to hunting. We have to expend far more energy trying to hunt than we can ever extract from the food that we ultimately get from hunting. We're too inefficient. Again, the reason hunting is practical for carnivores, those gigantic stomachs, plus the fact that they can eat rotting flesh. We can't. They have such strong acid that they can eat rotting tissue and kill all of the bacteria, the maggots, the pathogens that will start to accumulate once that animal's body starts to break down. We get sick if we eat poorly cooked turkey. And since there are no emergency rooms, no antibiotics, no ER doctors, on the savannah, if you develop, gastroenteritis in the wild, you're dead. And so, we could not afford to eat rotting tissue in the wild. So therefore, hunting or eating rotting tissue simply isn't a practical solution for us. And that means that if we expend 3,000 calories trying to chase down some animal, first of all, we're unlikely to catch it. But let's say we were lucky enough to do that. Our stomach will only hold about 800 calories, max, okay? That means that we've expended way more calories than we can extract from that carcass before it starts to rot. So we're at an energy deficit. Yeah. That's a recipe for starvation. So we cannot, that doesn't get us ahead. That means we're losing and we will ultimately starve to death. That is not a viable strategy for survival. But on the other hand, a lifestyle where we are out gathering plants on the savannah, is one where we can gather high energy plants, bring them back to wherever our campsite is, store them, eat at our leisure. These plant foods are alive until we eat them. They are fresh. They are not toxin laden. They are not loaded with bacteria, and they are full of fiber, antioxidants, vitamins, nutrients, and they're health promoting. And that is what we did, and that is what kept us alive.
I can't wait to meet a carnivore, one of those carnivore people or paleo, so I could sock them with that info, Dr. Mills. It's very convincing.
Yes, and
it just makes sense. Like everything you're describing on how we feel and how we move and how we experience our gut and its processes, everything that you said is just like, yes, that makes sense. That's exactly how I feel and how I would feel when I've gotten, food poisoning from just ever so slightly undercooking chicken. Right. It's not
right. And even more importantly, the research on people who eat paleo shows that they ultimately end up developing heart disease, cancer, and have higher rates of all-cause mortality. So they die sooner. It is not a diet that correlates with long-term survival. It's not healthy.
Now, you're talking about paleo, because I hear they actually, or carnivore. We're talking about paleo folks?
Both.
Both. The carnivores
paleo,
just eat meat, right? They don't eat anything else. I don't even know.
Yeah, and those people are just retarded's not a nice word, but
it's from the 70s.
Right. We're also say that today, are we?
That is so incredibly backwards and unhealthy, and those people are just are really getting sick. And I mean, a meat-based diet that contains no fiber is completely unhealthy. I mean, because you're starving your microbiome, you are creating humongous amounts of toxins in your colon, and it's a recipe for an early death.
What would be the explanation if they are not lying? You will certainly hear some people that are eating a carnivore diet, not paleo, but full on carnivore, have switched over from an entirely plant-based diet and didn't, quote, feel well and have, completely turned around. I'm not saying their health. I've never even heard them say that, but they're saying how they feel. What are the mechanisms that would be going on that would they just not eating a truly whole food plant-based diet, or do they not wait long enough to really get through the mass amounts of fiber that you do have to adjust to only over maybe 21 days or something? I don't think it's a really long process, but what is that? Why is that possibility?
They have psyched themselves into thinking that they're doing better. I mean, it's
like mental trickery that they just are saying.
It absolutely is. I mean, honestly, you follow those people and they will eventually be sick as dogs. I mean, look.
But how do we explain people in the Eskimos and people in the north then who don't eat a lot of vegetables and things? Do they get sick as dogs and we just don't know?
Actually, if you look at the original literature on the Inuit people who ate a traditional Inuit diet,
Sorry, I said Eskimos, didn't I? That also is an old term.
No, Eskimos, Inuit are interchangeable terms, but the literature on people who ate those traditional diets, they did not live very long. And so
the other thing that we've got to bring up that nobody ever does is the fact of how much the Inuits move. They move from the second they wake up until the second they go to bed, because their whole day is mostly about finding food, right? We sit, we don't move like that in this society. So, they could potentially get away with a little whale blubber, not clogging their arteries because they are moving 90% of their waking moments. which is
But
not the case in North America.
But again, they all were dying from hemorrhagic strokes. So I mean, again, that they did not live very long, and they all lost their teeth by their 40s. So they did not. That was not a diet that correlated with long life. It was long enough for them to reproduce, and you know, produce the next generation, because you know human beings become fertile by our early teens, but it did not correlate with maximum lifespan. And you know, sure, if somebody wants to live, reproduce, and die by 42, if that's all that matters to you, you can live that way. I personally want to live a lot longer, and I want to be a lot healthier.
There aren't an extensive amount of choices when it's never gets above 20 degrees in terms of fresh fruits and vegetables. Right. So yeah. So the one thing that we do have in common with paleo is no dairy. Vegans have that one thing in common with paleo. And I love to move into food justice and dietary racism as it relates to what's happening in our schools and the work that you and I have been passionate about for a long time. You know, the federal government promotes dairy milk to kids while completely denying nutritionally equivalent alternatives entirely. And it ignores the widespread lactose intolerance among communities of color. And there are so many points to this situation and this argument and you know, the work that we're doing in trying to get soy milk into schools at the same reimbursable rate as cow's milk, and get rid of the milk note so that children can freely choose a healthy alternative to dairy milk. But one important point that you bring up that I love how you speak about this is considering that the wrong foods can make learning difficult, and that dairy milk in schools, as we know, create upset stomachs, cramping, sure, bloating, gas, diarrhea, wheezing. You know, you're not going to be able to concentrate at all when you feel like that. And there is a persistent achievement gap that exists between white and non-white students. And you think that this could be one of the reasons, the pressing of dairy milk on all, and how, yeah, I'll let you go.
Yeah, but I even want to step back a little bit, because I want to make the point that I think that dairy is probably one of the most unnatural products that humans consume. Yeah. I mean, it has been normalized because it has become a widespread cultural practice, but that in no way means that it is normal. Milks are designed by nature to be consumed by species-specific infants, and it is no more normal for human beings to be consuming the mammary secretions of a cow than it would be for us to be consuming rat milk, ferret milk, opossum milk,
dog milk,
or dog milk, or cat milk.
Yeah.
And I'm making this point because we talk about or focus on the lactose component of dairy products, because that causes the most immediate issues in terms of health problems that people experience. But there are other issues associated with dairy consumption that are not as obvious, but that are potentially as serious. And that has to do with the proteins that are in milk, and not just the proteins, but one of the things that we are becoming more aware of now is that mammalian milks are loaded with mRNA fragments, messenger RNA fragments that we believe are designed to interact with the genes of the infant mammal to program that mammal's genes and essentially kickstart them to program their immune system, to program their physiology, and so on and so forth. And it may be that, and we also know that when humans consume cow's milk, they tend to gain excess weight. They tend to put on excess body fat. They have a long-term tendency to have higher rates of diabetes, obesity, long-term risk for colon cancer, heart disease, and all these things. And this may be related to abnormal physiology that could be long-term side effects of this abnormal programming by these mRNA fragments from these bovine messenger RNA fragments. So because we should not be drinking cow's milk. It's just like if you were in a car accident and lost a lot of blood and you needed a blood transfusion and you came into my emergency room and I said, Dotsie, we're out of human blood. I'm going to give you some cow's blood. You look at me and say, are you out of your mind? Heck no, I'm not going to let you infuse cow's blood in me. Well, just like you would not allow me to infuse cow's blood into you, we should not be feeding cow's milk to either our children or ourselves. It is not meant for humans. Cow's milk proteins are much more growth stimulatory than human milk proteins. And as a result, they tend to cause excess growth in children and cause them to put on much more weight than they should. Do you know that there are studies that show that women who consume milk while they're pregnant tend to have much larger babies? And people will say, well, what's wrong with that? It's good to have a big baby. No, because it makes them have much larger babies and have more problems with pelvic floor injuries. They tend to end up having incontinence problems, sexual dysfunction problems throughout their lifetime. And
you mean because the baby went through the canal and it was a tough thing?
Ripped their pelvic floor apart, ripped up their vaginal canal. And so all of these incontinence problems and urinary incontinence problems that women are having throughout their lifetimes are oftentimes due to them having babies that are too big for their birth canal because they've been drinking cow's milk. And it's caused them to have these abnormally large babies. We are basically causing many of the health problems that we see in women and in our children because we are eating the wrong foods and we're feeding our children the wrong foods. And we need to stop basically feeding ourselves bovine mammary secretions, which is distorting our physiology and causing abnormal growth patterns, which is results in long-term health consequences. And it's not just the lactose. But again, getting back to what Dotsie was referring to with respect to the lactose, only about 30% of Caucasian kids are lactose intolerant versus 75 to 90% of children of color. And that means that when the children of color are given cow's milk on their school lunch tray, they are going to get sick. And so after lunch or after breakfast, while the white kids are able to study with no problems, the children of color are going to be cramping. They're going to have diarrhea. They're going to have intestinal distress. They're going to have nausea. They're going to have malaise. And so whereas the white kids will be able to study, focus, concentrate, these children of color are going to be ill. And that, yes, that may in fact account for at least part of the persistent achievement gap that we see between white kids and children of color, because we are making them sick by what we're feeding them. And that's wrong and it's unfair. And it can be avoided by allowing them to have a non-dairy alternative that will not make them ill. And we know that the dietary guidelines have said that soy milk is nutritionally equivalent to cow's milk. Soy milk will not make these children of color ill, and it should be provided as a non-dairy alternative for children who are lactose intolerant and for even the white kids whose parents don't want them consuming cow's milk.
Can you just give for our audience who might not have heard other shows and our first show about what this is about milk in schools?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. So the by law, the every child that participates in the National School Lunch Program must receive a 1 or 2 cartons of cow's milk on their school lunch tray. That is a matter of law.
And that's about 31 million children, if people are wondering how many that is.
Yeah, and that milk is provided by the United States Department of Agriculture. It is paid for by the USDA. It is not paid for by the local school district. That money comes from the USDA. And that is why the local school districts don't have the money to provide the non-dairy alternative. That's why we have to have the USDA institute the rule change so that they will provide the money to offer the non-dairy option for these local school districts, because the local school districts simply don't have the money. Right now, the providing dairy for the National School Lunch Program is about $500 million annual windfall for the dairy industry. So it's big business. And that's why the dairy industry is fighting tooth and nail to maintain this cash cow, forgive the pun. But quite frankly, I am tired of them pimping children of color for profit. And it's time to stop extracting money out of the backs of children of color and making our kids sick for profit.
But just a note, as you're saying, it's the money's from the USDA. The money is from the US taxpayer.
Exactly.
Right. So also
exactly. I'm quite frankly furious that my tax dollars are being used to make children of color sick so that some dairy farmer can make money.
And this is what Switch for Good and you, Dr. Mills, have been working on since pretty much day one of Switch for Good, right, Dotsie?
Absolutely.
Yep. Yeah. And it's amazing how many Congress people of color, certainly not going to point anyone out, but we had a really colorful conversation, didn't we, Dr. Mills, like maybe 8 months ago with one of them. And I'm like, my phone is blowing up with text as this guy is speaking and making no sense whatsoever. It's really it's frustrating, but it's sad that realization doesn't come clear when we explain the issue, right? It's simple to the two of us who've been doing it a long time, but it just also, once you explain it, so many of the Congress members go, oh, well, wait a minute. Why is this like this? Why? And it just kind of sinks in. But we had one difficult conversation, and I got a text that said, this is piles and piles of horse shit. And it was
from Dr. Mills.
Yeah. Sorry to out you. It was just in the moment. It thought, what is this guy? I think senile, but it was just the wildest scenario and you could really, I think the thing that was so frustrating to me, Dr. Mills, was you could feel the pressure that he was really putting upon himself from the dairy industry. Like, I would imagine that's one of his major funders, and it indeed is, because we've looked it up. But you just think, oh my gosh, you're willing to sell out all these children?
So exactly, and the you could see the calculations going on in his mind as he was saying about how he had dairy farmers in his amongst his constituents, and how he was going to try and finesse this issue. And it's like, I don't give a damn how many dairy farmers you have amongst your constituents. We're talking about the health of school children. And, nobody's talking about eliminating dairy. We're simply talking about providing an option for children who cannot tolerate dairy so that they won't be made ill. And that is just a matter of equity and justice. And how can anyone not support that?
Yeah.
So is this a matter of, oh, by the way, I think you both should out that person, but anyway, is this a matter of
we're in the middle of it, Alexandra.
Okay. Afterwards.
When we win, yeah.
So are you all trying to get a bill in Congress, or are you trying to change the USDA's this policy?
We are asking, we have support from many Congress members on this issue because it was important to be able to educate them and to have them behind this. But this is a Department of Agriculture issue. This is a Secretary Thomas Vilsack issue. He has the power to fix this and make this right. It wasn't originally voted by Congress to put milk in schools. Right. That's in agriculture. So it's, yeah. It's getting them to fix it.
Can make a rule change and change this overnight. We don't need a bill. He, with a stroke of a pen, he can take care of minority school children. So this does not require an act of Congress to stop abusing these children. And right now, this is child abuse. This is flat out child abuse, and it needs to stop. And I'm almost at the point where I'm going to argue that until they stop feeding lactose to children of color, we need to start putting something in the white kids' lunch to make them sick, just like they're doing to the
peanuts. Yeah, I always say they took peanuts out right away when some kids got allergic. So I think peanuts should be mandated in every school. So
it would change overnight. Yes.
Yes, yeah, right. Let's talk about that. This is totally emblematic of the racism, the term dietary racism that you started with. So not only are you two working together to get cow's milk not to be the only option for children, but also you worked hard on changing the dietary guidelines. And I just wanted to say that I know you and Dotsie both spoke in 2020. These guidelines are revised every, 5 years or 10 years? 5 years. And you spoke in front of the Dietary Guidelines Committee. And I saw, Dr. Mills, your speech. And may I just quote a sentence, or maybe two from it, because it was so ballsy. And here it is. You say, I actually came here today to call out the racism inherent in the US dietary guidelines. But then as I got a look at this committee, I suddenly understood why it is such an intractable problem. This committee bears no relationship to the general populace of the United States, and whoever put it together is clearly still practicing the optics of tokenism. Wow. Can you explain what you were talking about there?
Yeah. And yes, I absolutely came with the idea that I wanted to raise the committee's consciousness about the problem of lactose intolerance and children of color, thinking that I was going to make them aware of something that they might not be aware of. And then I looked at a committee that was, I think, out of 25 people on that committee, there was maybe one person of color, maybe two. And
that day, there was no person of color up there.
Oh, okay. All right.
That day, I mean, there might be somebody on the committee that was sick, but it was all white people and there were only two women.
Okay. So that was it. And it was crystal clear to me. So I thought, okay, I'm being generous. I thought maybe there might have been one Hispanic person.
It doesn't matter because 1 out of 25 still makes your point. And
that's why, and I'm like, so this is the problem.
Yeah.
This is why there is no real representation of people of color. This bears no resemblance to the American populace. And this is why there is no real sensitivity
Yeah,
to
or
the
urgency or anything.
right, that people of color are the issues that we confront and what our real needs are. This is the problem. You guys are the problem. And at best, you may have one person up here, being the token, but there's no real concern about what our actual needs are. And this is just appalling in this day and age to have this kind of systemic racism and complete insensitivity to the needs of people of color. This is just completely unacceptable. And I was absolutely appalled. Absolutely.
I'm so glad you called
so
them
yeah,
out.
so that's where that, I mean, honestly, that was a complete departure from what I had planned to say. And yeah, I think the passion of what I felt really came through. And it was amazing because that testimony went viral in a way I had never intended. I was getting calls. My barber, when I went to the barbershop, showed me that clip that had been sent to him from his cousin in Louisiana. And it was just, it was.
So Dr. Mills, we're talking about people of color and how, eating and dairy, and also how eating plants is great for everyone. There are a lot of vegan documentaries out there. You've been in several of them, and a lot of influencers who tout the vegan diet. And most of them are Caucasian. And so it can be, apparently, I watched The Invisible Vegan, which is one of the documentaries you're in, which is different because it is produced by, and pretty much, I think everybody in it is a person of color, mostly African Americans. And they opened my eyes to the fact, I didn't know this, being a white person and just often in my own bubble, and much to my embarrassment, I was kind of embarrassed, is that we need to work better at bringing people in, and that a lot of times telling people, well, you should eat this, plants, yay, it's so easy and delicious. That comes off as sort of me being a white person telling people what to do, which is what white people do a lot of around the world. So can you give me your perspective on that and some advice for people like me?
Sure. Yeah, first of all, I know that for the most part, people are well-meaning. But I think what's most important is that, it's so let me kind of personalize it as a man, that men have a tendency to mansplain, that when we want to talk to women, we tend to want to explain to you guys how things should be, right? As opposed to listening to you and talking to you and getting your perspective. And I think most women would tell you, why don't you shut up and listen to us? Instead of coming in and telling us as a man how it should be, why don't you ask us our opinion? Why don't you ask us for our perspective as women? Why don't you listen to what we have to say and get our perspective and viewpoint, and you might learn something. Well, it's a similar dynamic in terms of white versus person of color, that it's understanding that as people of color, we have a unique perspective on things, and that our experience is different, and our perspective is different, and it's very rich, and it's unique, and we have a lot to offer. And so rather than having a paternalistic approach to, well, let us tell you how to be vegan or let us bring you up to speed, actually say, tell us what you think. Tell us what your viewpoint is. Tell us what your thoughts are. Let's hear your take on this plant-based lifestyle. Don't assume that we have no experience with being plant-based, because there's actually a very long and very rich and very deep history of plant-based lifestyle within the African-American community and other communities as well. One big thing is that within the white community, a major impetus for becoming vegan has to do with animal rights. Whereas from the African-American perspective, health is often a major driver. And that's not to say that animal rights isn't important, but health tends to be more of a driver. And I've seen sometimes that some white vegans will judge African-Americans for not having more of a animal rights viewpoint, as though to say, like, well, you're less moral because you're not as concerned about the animals. And David Carter, who styles himself as a 300-pound vegan, says something that I have never forgotten, and I love it. He says, animals don't care why you stop eating them as long as you stop. and that's the bottom line. And the point is that as long as we all get to the same place, it really kind of doesn't matter what path we do. From my standpoint, I actually think that the foundation of why we do what we do has to be health. And I'll tell you why. Because I have seen this sort of almost masochistic impulse in veganism that says, well, I'm vegan for the animals, meaning that I'm willing to sacrifice my health because I love animals so much. Well, that sounds very noble and very, wonderful. But quite frankly, I can't go to some mother with, 3 children and tell her, I expect you to sacrifice the health of your children to save, a family of ducks or, some chickens. But what I can tell her is, it is better for you and your children if you don't eat these animals. That, they will be healthier. You will be healthier. And you'll save these animals. So if they understand that it is healthier for you, it is better for the animals, and it's better for the planet, it all makes sense. So you don't have to be a masochist. You don't have to sacrifice your health, because it all works.
And well, that doesn't help anybody. If you're sick and you're sacrificing, right. You're not going to attract. Nobody.
And ultimately, you're trading one kind of misery and hurt for another. If I'm not hurting animals, but I'm hurting myself, what good is that? You feel me?
Yeah.
So, but it's totally unnecessary, because it's not necessary for me to hurt myself to save animals. I'm helping myself, and I'm helping the animal, and I'm helping the planet. That's the beauty of it. So it's all good.
Do you feel like that? Thank you. That's very helpful. And I think it's always a good reminder for us to be curious instead of tell people what we think. It's just always better. And I also do think that when people become vegan for whatever way, unless it's to lose weight, I don't think that's a very, to look better. I don't think that's as powerful. But when you see the health benefits, you often, your heart opens. This happened to me, and you become more compassionate. They go hand in hand.
Absolutely. And I also feel that the one thing that I've learned in life is that we're all, I love Greek mythology. And in Greek mythology, Athena sprang from the head of Zeus, fully formed and in a complete set of armor. It said that Zeus one day had a terrific headache, and he was sort of had this headache, and then boom, thing sprang from his head, fully formed, completely dressed in armor. Very few of us arrived in veganism that way. I mean, fully formed,
Yeah.
I mean, most of us, it was a journey.
Yeah.
And given that, we have to allow other people time to make that journey. And we have to be patient with them. And, I mean, of course, once we arrive at that truth, we want everybody to be where we are immediately, but we have to realize, you know what? We didn't get there immediately. It took us time. We didn't, the minute, when we first heard about it, we didn't say, you know what, that's right, I'm going to be vegan today. It took us however long it took us. And we have to be patient with each other. We have to allow each other that time to make that, take those steps, however long it takes, and to just be patient, and to not judge, to not condemn, but to encourage, and to be quietly persistent, and to try and encourage. And that is sometimes one of the hardest things to do. But if we can do that, I think we will help each other along.
Mhm.
It's a great documentary, by the way, everybody. The Invisible Vegan. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, and another good one that's coming out as soon as they can get the distribution rights is They're Trying to Kill Us, which is by Keegan Kuhn, who worked on What the Health and Cowspiracy and I think Seaspiracy. He did it in conjunction with John Lewis, and it's all about the health crisis in the Black community and how veganism is a response to that.
Great.
Yeah.
So
Get it out
if you
there.
haven't seen the trailer, please look it up. It is an amazing video or documentary, and I'm not saying that just because I'm in it.
No, it is. And the more people that watch the trailer and push to get it out there, because it's just had so much trouble getting distribution. It's so frustrating.
And the reason it's having trouble
they-
is because they want them to cut content because it's so hard hitting.
Yeah.
Is that right? Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Exactly.
It's
And
today.
they have been, God bless them, they've been unwilling to cut the content, thank God, and hopefully they will be able to get it in its uncut form.
Yeah. God forbid we actually just say it straight, right?
Okay.
Say, Dr. Mills, tell us what the Bible says about eating a plant-based diet, and maybe even being kind to animals.
Sure. Yes, I thank you for asking that question, because actually, when people ask me why I became plant-based, it's my journey was a little unusual. I actually came to consciousness about plant-based diets through the Bible. I became a Seventh-day Adventist as a teenager, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church teaches its members and encourages its members to become plant-based, because the Bible teaches us that that was the diet God designed us for. And right there, right up front in Genesis chapter 1, after God creates humans, he tells us that we are to be vegans. Genesis 1:29. He says, I've given you every plant with seed and its fruit. That's going to be your diet. Interestingly, even after humans messed up and sin entered the world, and God had to change the planet, and he modified the world. He did modify our diet, but he didn't include meat. He said, now you're going to eat the plants of the field, but not meat. So we were still supposed to be plant-based. From that, I had to accept, wow, okay, God designed me to be plant-based. But I still wasn't willing to be plant-based because I grew up eating meat and I loved it. And I loved hamburgers and I loved fried chicken. And my mom was a very good cook and I didn't think I could live without steak and hamburgers. And so now the Adventist church teaches that you can't eat what's called unclean meats. So I stopped eating pork and shellfish and all that, but I still kept eating hamburgers and chicken and stuff for about a year and a half after I joined the church. But I was struggling with some personal issues. And I was talking to God about it one night, and he said to me, if you want a closer relationship with me, you need a clearer mind. And for that, you need a better diet. You got to stop eating meat. And at that point, I just remember that sort of frisson of panic. I'm like, wow, I had a choice. And so I just said, okay, God, if you want me to stop, you got to take away the desire to do it. And he did. And I stopped. And that was September of 1974. And I stopped eating meat. And so my reasons for stopping were spiritual and health. And I started feeling the difference in my health almost immediately. I mean, I felt better. I had more energy. My mind definitely was clearer. I needed less sleep. My acne disappeared. I didn't get colds. I literally, it was clear to me that this was definitely healthier for me. And that is what started me on the pathway that ultimately led me to medicine. Now, the other thing that's interesting when it comes to the animal rights issue is I often ask people, everybody's familiar with the statement in the Bible where God says, he creates Adam and he says, it is not good that the man should be alone. And so I said, well, what did God do after he made that statement? Everybody says he created Eve, but that's not what the Bible says. If you read chapter 2 of Genesis, God says, it is not good that the man should be alone. Then it says, and God created the beasts of the earth and brought them to Adam so that he would give them names. And it was after Adam had given all of the animals their names that Adam turned to God and said, there is no helpmeet for me. And that's when God put Adam to sleep, took a rib and created Eve. And so Adam's first companions were the animals. They were created as his friends and his companions. And he learned from the animals the importance of having a mate. So what the Bible is teaching us is that animals were put here as our companions and our friends, not as creatures to be abused and mistreated. So the Bible is very clear about what our relationship to our fellow earthlings is supposed to be. In the book of Daniel, when Daniel was carried off into the court of Babylon, he refused to eat the food that was given at the court of Babylon and said, look, let's do a test. Let us eat nothing but vegetables for 10 days, compare us to the people that are eating all this meat and stuff, see who's healthy. We're told after 10 days, they were not only healthier, but more agile in their minds than the people who ate the food provided by the Babylonian court. So again, we're taught that a plant-based diet will make you healthier and smarter and more physically fit. So it's very clear all the way through the Bible that not only is this our original diet, but that it will make us healthier and more fit and more agile in mind. Yeah, it's absolutely clear that this is the diet we were designed for. It is the diet that is healthiest for us, and science backs it up from start to finish. Science supports everything the Bible has told us from the very beginning. And that's what I've spent my career researching and proving.
Thank you so much about that. The Christian church is so powerful. I know there was a diet. I had some friends who were on it wasn't called Daniel's diet, but it was some kind of an eating program that followed what Daniel did. And I thought that was a really beautiful way for the church to use its influence to help its congregation.
Right. Yeah. And my only concern about people when they do the Daniel diet is they only do it for 10 days. I'm like, just stay home. I will say that last month I did a sermon for a church in Columbia, Maryland, called "Why Diet is Important in God's Plan of Salvation," and that sermon is on my website, Dr. Milton Mills, plantbasednation.com. So if anybody wants to review that sermon, it's available on the website. And it's a pretty good sermon.
I think I saw it. I thought it was excellent. Very, very good. Was that when the priests were ordained, the ministers were ordained beforehand, or was that another
time?
I know you speak a lot. Yes, I did.
Wow. Yes.
Of course, we do our homework around here, even though we know you, Dr. Mills. There's always something new. We know. So anyway.
Oh, yes.
It was beautiful. It was really beautiful. And
that was a really lovely service. I was very moved by that service. Yeah.
Yes, we saw that. Yes. Well, thank you so much for being on our show, our 200th show. And, we hope to have you back on, well, hopefully sooner than 200. Let's say maybe in 50 shows.
We got this whole list of questions, and there's 20 that we didn't even touch on.
I have a whole bunch of very doctory, calcium, protein, microbiome. So we will
hey,
this is a little more philosophical.
Whenever you guys want me back, I'm happy to be back. Because we can go on and on and on forever. It's a lot of fun.
Clearly.
Thank you. We know you're busy, and so thank you so much for taking the time and for all the work you do.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
What's the best way for people to find you, and how do you like people to reach out to you?
So again, the website, Dr. Milton Mills, plantbasednation.com. I'm on Facebook as Milton Rene Mills, Rene Mills. Those are probably the two best ways.
Okay. And may I mention that soon you will have your own nonprofit.
Yes.
You're awaiting your 501c3.
Yes.
And it's a cousin of Switch for Good. Your words, not mine.
Yes. No, but it's true. And well, actually, but that's that you inspired me to do that. Because and working with you on the anti-dairy campaign, I once again, just as I realized that it was important to be a doctor to educate people about being plant-based, I realized that to really help further and push our initiatives and educating people about the dangers of dairy, that it would be helpful to have an organization of doctors pushing these initiatives. So decided to form Physicians for Healthy America. And it will, just like Switch for Good, it will be Physician P for Healthy America.
Number 4, not FOR.
Yes, right. Absolutely. So yes, and as soon as we're waiting our 501c, and we're off to the races. Yes.
Incredible.
Wow, congratulations.
Yeah.
And then we'll open it up for general membership. Absolutely.
Okay.
Can people who aren't doctors join?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Okay. We will welcome everyone for sure.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, everybody. Go watch Dr. Milton Mills on YouTube.
Yeah.
What the Health, The Invisible Vegan, and the upcoming film. Say the name again.
They're trying to kill us.
They're trying to kill us.
They're trying to kill us. Thank you.
All right. Listen, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, folks. Okay. Back by very popular demand is our plant-powered plate fridge magnet, which you are going to receive for free if you leave us a rating and a review on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast on. So here are the details. Just write your quick review. Does not need to be long, does not need to be a whole story. Just be honest and speak from the heart. Then take a quick screenshot of the review you wrote and email it to us at podcast@switchforgood.org. That's podcast@switchforgood.org. And include your mailing address so we can send you a power plate. We are doing this because the more reviews we garner, the higher we go in search results, which means more folks will learn about our podcast. So the power is in your hands. Leave us a review and zoom, your power plate arrives at your doorstep.
So thank you so much for tuning in today. If we helped you in any way, then click the subscribe button and let's keep hanging out together. We have so much more to share with you.
And if you need more information on actually making the switch for good, please visit us at switchforgood.org for loads of info. And you can subscribe to our mailing list where you will receive all sorts of super cool gifts, discount codes to our very fave dairy-free products, and a lifetime of powerful health tips.
So join us on the journey to switch for good. This is the future.